The midday sun beat down on the crowded marketplace, shimmering off the polished glass windows of expensive boutiques and dancing across the freshly waxed bonnets of luxury cars parked nearby. The city was alive with chatter and footsteps, a constant hum of commerce where people hurried about, chasing bargains, trends, or simply a way to flaunt their wealth. Among them shuffled a man in faded cotton trousers, worn sandals, and a loose sweat-stained shirt. His straw hat, though practical, looked out of place among the sleek suits and glittering jewelry that decorated the crowd. His clothes were dusty, his hands rough with calluses, and his posture bore the unmistakable weight of long days under the sun. He was, to anyone looking, just a farmer. But the man's eyes scanned the marketplace with calm deliberation. Where others saw glittering window displays, he saw the movement of goods. Where others admired luxury storefronts, he noticed rent values, foot traffic, and prime property locations. He wasn't here to shop. He was here to observe. Yet observation had its price. As he strolled past a boutique selling imported perfumes, a group of young men leaning against a shiny black SUV burst into laughter. One pointed at his sandals. "Hey, uncle, did your cow eat your shoes?" Another added, smirking, "Careful, or he'll smell up the whole place. Farmers like him belong in the fields, not here." Their laughter was loud enough to turn heads. Several passers-by smiled politely, while others shook their heads in disapproval. But most, curious about the joke, glanced at the farmer with thinly veiled disdain. He paused, looked at them, and gave a slow smile. Not defensive, not angry. Just a small, patient smile. Without a word, he tipped his straw hat politely and moved on. Inside a nearby cafe, a pair of well-dressed women whispered loudly enough for him to hear. "Honestly, look at him. Who comes to this part of the city dressed like that? It's embarrassing. He probably came to beg. He should sell his chickens or something before daring to walk around here," the other added with a laugh. The farmer didn't react. He stepped into the same cafe, took a seat near the window, and ordered a simple tea. The waiter hesitated, glancing at his clothes, but eventually scribbled the order down. As he waited, the farmer's gaze drifted. Across the street stood an aging commercial building with peeling paint and crooked signs. Few people paid attention to it, distracted by the newer, fancier shops around. But he noticed something others didn't: the steady stream of customers entering its small grocery, the way tenants filled every floor, and the building's prime corner location. The farmer's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. While others judged his appearance, his mind was tallying numbers. He knew that buildings' rent alone brought in more in a month than most people in this market earned in a year. And he knew it intimately, because he owned it. What no one in the cafe or marketplace realized was that this simple farmer wasn't just passing through. He owned half the land surrounding the city, countless warehouses, and major stakes in agricultural exports that fed not just this country but neighboring ones too. His wealth wasn't worn on his body. It was woven into the soil, the crops, and the businesses, quietly flourishing under his name. But wealth didn't matter to him the way it did to the laughing boys or the whispering women. He had lived poor once, back when a single sack of grain determined whether his family ate or starved. Simplicity, humility, and patience were habits forged in hardship. He never saw the need to replace his sturdy sandals just because others flashed designer shoes. The waiter finally brought his tea, setting it down with a hurried, almost dismissive nod. The farmer thanked him warmly, sipping it slowly, savoring the flavor rather than rushing. Around him, conversations swirled, deals being made, gossip being exchanged, judgments being cast. He simply listened, content. Yet fate has a way of testing patience. A commotion erupted near the cafe door. The same group of young men who had mocked him earlier strolled in, laughing loudly. They carried the air of entitlement, gold chains glinting, designer watches flashing, and an arrogance that filled the room like cheap perfume. Spotting the farmer again, they couldn't resist. "Look, he's here too," one sneered. "Maybe he's saving his tea money for a goat." The cafe chuckled lightly, some out of amusement, others out of discomfort. The farmer raised his cup, smiled, and said quietly, "A goat can be more valuable than a car if you know how to use it." The boys laughed harder, clapping their hands. "Hear that? The shepherd thinks he's wise." But their laughter was cut short when the cafe manager hurried over, nervous yet deferential, speaking in hushed tones. "Sir, the meeting room upstairs is ready. The delegation is waiting." The farmer set down his cup and nodded. "Thank you. I'll be there shortly." The young men blinked in surprise. "Delegation? Waiting for him?" The cafe manager, who had ignored his dusty clothes minutes earlier, now bowed slightly, treating him with a respect reserved for very few. As the farmer rose, adjusting his straw hat, the murmurs began. Customers whispered, curiosity sparking like wildfire. Who was this man? Why would a delegation wait for him? The farmer didn't explain. He simply walked upstairs, his steps calm, steady, unhurried. But behind those steps was a truth none of them knew. The farmer was there to finalize a land deal worth billions, a deal that would shape the city's future. And the boys who mocked him, they had just laughed at the richest man in the country. Upstairs in the cafe's private meeting room, the atmosphere was entirely different from the bustling marketplace below. The noise of chatter and laughter faded, replaced by the quiet hum of an air conditioner and the soft clink of glasses being arranged on a polished oak table. 5 men in dark suits sat waiting, their posture stiff, their faces reflecting the weight of anticipation. As the farmer entered, they all rose respectfully. "Mr. Elias," one of them greeted, bowing slightly. "Thank you for coming. We apologize for the delay. Everything is prepared for your review." Elias smiled warmly, adjusting his straw hat before setting it on the table. "No apologies needed. Patience is the foundation of good harvests and good deals," he said, his voice calm, steady, carrying the authority of someone who had negotiated far more than contracts, someone who had wrestled with nature itself and won. The men quickly slid a thick folder toward him, filled with maps, contracts, and numbers. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the blueprint of the city's future. The government had been courting Elias for months to finalize this deal, selling him vast tracts of underdeveloped land surrounding the city. Others had dismissed the rocky soil and remote locations as useless. But Elias saw beyond the present. He saw the highways that would be built, the factories that would rise, the markets that would expand. His vision was never short-term. Where others saw dust, he saw tomorrow's gold. As he flipped through the documents, the men exchanged nervous glances. Every tick of his pen, every pause of thought, carried the weight of billions. Finally, after a long silence, Elias looked up and said simply, "I'll take it all." Relief spread across the officials' faces. The contracts were signed, the handshakes exchanged, and within that quiet cafe, history was written. Downstairs, the young men who had mocked him earlier lounged in their booth, sipping overpriced drinks. Their laughter had subsided into idle chatter, but curiosity gnawed at them. They had watched the dusty farmer walk into the private meeting room, escorted, respected, deferred to, and it didn't fit with their idea of who he was supposed to be. Maybe he's some local politician, one guessed. Or maybe the cafe owes him money, another joked, though his voice lacked conviction. Their theories were cut short when the door to the meeting room opened and the officials escorted Elias out. But this time their demeanor was unmistakable, respectful, almost reverent. They shook his hand firmly, their voices low but filled with deference. One even opened the door for him, bowing slightly as he passed. The cafe froze. Conversation stilled. Forks paused midway to mouths. Everyone who had mocked, dismissed, or ignored him now watched in stunned silence as the poor farmer walked calmly through the room, his presence suddenly commanding respect without him uttering a single word. The waiter, who had earlier served him half-heartedly, now stumbled forward nervously. "Sir, would you like another tea?" "On the house?" Elias chuckled softly. "Thank you, son, but I've had enough." He adjusted his hat and strode out into the marketplace. The crowd parted instinctively as though sensing something they had missed before. People whispered, eyes wide with realization. And then, as often happens in places where gossip travels faster than the wind, the truth began to spread. "That's Elias, isn't it?" A merchant murmured to his neighbor. "The Elias? The landowner? The one who owns half the city?" "Yes. The richest man in the country." Another confirmed, awe dripping from their voice. The whispers grew into a chorus, spreading through the marketplace like wildfire. By the time Elias reached the street, even the boys who had mocked him knew exactly who they had laughed at. Panic flickered across their faces. The bold arrogance that had filled their laughter minutes before was gone, replaced by nervous whispers and pale expressions. "Did we insult him?" one muttered. "Not just insult. We made a joke of him in front of everyone. What if he ruins us? A man like that could crush our families with a snap of his fingers." But Elias didn't turn back. He didn't need revenge. For men like him, dignity wasn't proven by punishing mockery. It was proven by rising above it. Still, fate had a way of teaching lessons. Later that week, the young men visited the office of a wealthy investor to pitch their flashy startup idea. They had dressed their best, rehearsed their lines, and convinced themselves that success was inevitable. But when the door opened to the investor's suite, their blood ran cold. Elias sat behind the desk, his straw hat resting casually on the side table, his same simple clothes exchanged only for a slightly cleaner shirt. He leaned back in his chair, watching them with calm, patient eyes. For a moment, silence filled the room. The young men stammered, struggling to speak. "You," one finally whispered, his voice breaking. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Yes, me. Go on, tell me about your idea." Their pitch stumbled, their confidence shattered. They spoke too quickly, made mistakes, contradicted themselves. By the end, even they knew it was hopeless. Elias let the silence hang before speaking. "Do you know why your idea will fail?" They swallowed hard, shaking their heads. "Because arrogance blinds you," he said firmly. "You see wealth as something to flaunt. You see people as what they wear, not who they are. And so, you fail to see value where it truly lies. If you cannot respect a farmer, you cannot respect the land. And if you cannot respect the land, you will never build anything that lasts." His words struck harder than any rejection. Their faces flushed with shame, the memory of their laughter haunting them. Elias didn't shout. He didn't mock them back. He simply dismissed them with a nod. "Go, and next time before you laugh at someone, think twice. You never know whose hand you might need to shake tomorrow." They left in silence, their arrogance burned away, replaced by a lesson they would carry for life. Back in his village, Elias returned to his fields. He walked barefoot across the soil, his calloused hands brushing through the golden stalks of wheat swaying in the wind. Here, among the crops and earth, he felt richest of all. His wealth wasn't measured by the contracts he signed or the properties he owned, but by the simplicity of life, the honesty of labor, and the respect for the land that had given him everything. People would continue to whisper about him, to tell stories of the farmer who was secretly the richest man in the country. Some would laugh nervously, others with awe, but Elias never cared. He had always known one truth: true wealth isn't worn on the body, but carried in the heart. And those who mocked him had learned that truth the hard way.